So in today's video, Mamdani's now being forced to completely change his tone after getting pressed by reporters about Ken Griffin threatening to pull somewhere around 20,000 jobs out of New York City. And so let's go ahead and jump into this, because Mamdani went from this is what it is, this is what it's going to be type of energy to suddenly, hey, I'm willing to talk, I'm willing to work together, let's figure out what's best for New York City attitude. I want to break it all down, and we're going to start with this.
The mayor of New York getting pushback from billionaire Ken Griffin and his company called Citadel. Griffin threatening to not go forward with his planned project in Midtown Manhattan. That would create, he says, 15,000 permanent jobs.
Now, this all started when Mayor Mamdani made a social media video pushing for his and the governor's pied-à-terre tax, and doing it right in front of Griffin's apartment on Central Park South. Griffin bought it for $238 million back in 2019, even though he's not technically a New York City resident.
Oh, politics in New York City. NJ Burkett live in Midtown Manhattan with the mayor's reaction and what happens now. Newt?
Yeah, Bill, outside Griffin's apartment here on Central Park South, this is where Mamdani made his video last week. He campaigned, of course, as a democratic socialist, and he insists tonight he's doing exactly what he was elected to do. So a clash with the city's billionaires was all but inevitable. Mayor Mamdani was making no apologies today. Asked if he regrets the video, his answer was simple.
That home, when it was purchased, was the most expensive home in the United States of America.
Last week, the mayor stood outside 220 Central Park South.
Today, we're taxing the rich.
To promote a new tax on ultra-luxury second homes.
This pied-à-terre tax is specifically designed for the richest of the rich, those who store their wealth in New York City real estate, but who don't actually live there.
Case in point, the penthouse on the 53rd floor,
which hedge fund CEO Ken Griffin bought for $238 million.
Yeah, so you just heard that. And this is where I think you got to be highly critical of what Mamdani's plan is and look at it closely. Because what he's proposing is to go after people who own homes worth over $5 million in New York City and hit them with an additional tax on top of their property taxes they're already paying. Now, on the surface, that's an easy sell. That's not a hard sell. Not to the public. You say second home, you say rich, and automatically people are going to say, oh yeah, go get them. But the question I have is, why is it okay to target someone just because they were successful enough to own a property at that level in New York City? And so it's not about defending billionaires. It's about defending the idea of going after success, especially when the real issue is poor government management and overspending. How does this solve that? And what this really turns into is using that group as a funding source for more government programs. And I don't think that's a good direction to go into, because every time you end up creating more systems that expand government dependency, usually that system doesn't shrink. Usually it grows. Usually more people rely on it. And usually you end up needing more funding in order to keep it going. And the cost keeps on increasing. And so the real question becomes, when that bill keeps getting bigger, who becomes the next mark? Where do they get the money from next? Because eventually it doesn't stop with tax the rich. Let's not get it twisted. That's not where it stops. That may be where it begins, but not where it stops at all. And if you guys are enjoying the content, go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. That's the best way you can let me know, and subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. Let's continue.
Griffin lives in Miami, CEO of Citadel, a hedge fund that employs 2,500 people in New York. In a memo to the staff, the chief operating officer wrote, quote, "It is shameful that he used Ken's name as the example of those who supposedly aren't carrying their fair share. Griffin and the staff paid $2.3 billion in city and state taxes, he said, and Griffin himself directed $650 million in charitable gifts to city institutions. That their planned 1,600-foot tower on Park Avenue will create over 20,000 mostly permanent jobs." Then adding, "The project, if we move forward, will entail more than $6 billion of spending." If Griffin is reconsidering, Mamdani seems unconcerned.
I am intent, however, on balancing this budget in a manner that asks the wealthiest and the most profitable corporations to pay that little bit more so that everyone can afford to live in this city. And that means Ken Griffin, and that means so many others across the city. And that also means those who would love to join us in this city.
It's a big ecosystem here. And by villainizing the wealthier people that are providing a lot of the jobs for the middle class, ultimately you get a smaller pool of jobs for the middle class, and then who wins in that environment?
Yeah, and so I wanted to show that first because the way that story was basically being presented, you would think that Mamdani was standing 10 toes down on everything that he said. And that's not really what I got from when you actually saw the press conference where multiple reporters pressed him on this situation, and the tone was completely different. And so with that being said, let's get into that.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
Well, thank you. I think you should have a chance to respond to this because it's out there. And apparently Ken Griffin is upset that you've made him the poster boy for the super rich. Griffin's chief operating officer raised the possibility now that the company might not move forward with a massive new Midtown construction project. What is your response to that? Are you concerned? If not, why not?
You know, I want New Yorkers to succeed. I want them to build businesses, to grow our economy, and to create good-paying jobs. And Ken Griffin has been a part of that. He's an important employer and business leader in our city. And as I do with every New Yorker, I do want him to succeed. As mayor, I will continue to work with business leaders, including Mr. Griffin, as partners in building a city that continues to be the economic engine, not just of this state, but also of this country. And none of that negates the fact that we have a tax system that is fundamentally broken, and one that is part of the reason why we live in both the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and also a city where 1 in 4 New Yorkers are living in poverty.
He's going to move out.
You know, I am excited at what we have to come here in New York City, and I'm excited to build it with business leaders that includes Mr. Griffin.
I've got time for just 2 more. We'll go right here, and then Liz.
Now, Mamdani keeps saying New York tax system is broken. Okay, fine. Let's go with that and say it is. Your solution to a broken system is to go after the same group of people who already put into the system the most for even more money? You're not fixing anything. You're just exposing the fact that your entire system already depends on them. That's the part they don't want to say out loud, ladies and gentlemen, because New York is already being funded heavily by a small group of high earners. That's just reality. So now your plan is to squeeze them even more? Don't act surprised if they start changing their behavior then. That's all I'm saying. You know, moving money, pulling back investments, or just leaving altogether. And then what? Because once that happens, the revenue that you were counting on doesn't grow, it shrinks. And so now you got a bigger problem than when you even started. And so Mamdani calls it taxing the rich, but what he is really doing is gambling with the stability of the entire system. And at the same time, Mamdani's talking about tax the rich in public. Let's jump into this next clip because apparently an idea to fix the budget deficit is to go after city employees' pension funds by delaying or decreasing payment. Check it out.
Our city facing a generational fiscal crisis.
A potential solution from the Mamdani administration? Push off or decrease payments to pension funds for city employees like cops and teachers, possibly to the next generation.
Why should my child pay for his 5th grade teacher's salary and pension benefits in 2040?
The apparent answer from the Mamdani administration? To free up tax money to help close a projected $5.4 billion budget deficit. A spokesman for the mayor confirmed the idea, first reported in the New York Times. There are no details, but options are under discussion in City Hall and shared with officials in Governor Hochul's administration.
Quite frankly, it would cost more in the long run and make the wrong people pay the obligation.
The city has been on a $60 billion pension payment plan for more than a decade, with 6 years to go, finished in 2032. The city council proposed a similar idea, estimated to save $1 billion a year. It could be a point of agreement between Council Speaker Julie Menon and Mayor Mamdani, who's been pressing Albany leaders to solve his budget problems. As Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie put it to reporters Wednesday,
I spoke to the mayor today, and I told him, you know, it's be helpful for him and the city council to reconcile where they are.
Pension benefits are guaranteed under the state constitution. Michael Mulgrew, the teachers union chief, said pension trustees make decisions.
Periodically, we make changes when it's in the best interest of the pension fund.
Among the considerations,
right now the pension funds are in phenomenal shape. And what is the city proposing? Are they proposing lowering payments right now in lieu of making additional payments later on? Or are they proposing lowering payments right now in terms of making higher payments later on? We don't know what the proposal is.
One critic suggested it would be penny wise and pound foolish.
Mayor Mamdani is essentially considering a payday loan, where the city would get a short-term benefit, but would pay considerably more in interest by kicking costs out beyond 2040.
But that would be a problem for a future mayor, a future council, and future taxpayers.
Yeah, and so this is the bigger problem with all of this. Mamdani keeps trying to come up with whatever he can to make this budget right, to fill the gaps, right? But what happens next year and the year after that? Because if you don't fix the underlying issue, ladies and gentlemen, you're right back at the same position you started, looking for more money all over again, and then the cycle continues. But now I want to jump into the last clip. Mamdani sitting down with MS Now, and he was asked a question from a Republican voter. And so let's take a listen.
Chris Quinones here with us, who you might recognize, who was in, and I remember seeing you in that video when you said, $1 million question, and then you said, you're a Republican, you voted for Trump.
Thanks for the pitchforks.
No, New York contains multitudes, and we welcome them all. Yeah. Do you have a question for the mayor, or what are you looking for him to deliver on for you to become a convert or at least a supporter?
I'm a reasonable person. I mean, given what people think and say about Republicans, I don't parrot, I think for myself. Maybe I'm unique, maybe I'm not. I'll leave that for smarter people. What I would like to say is that I understand where you're coming from, what you want to provide for the people. And my personal belief, not that I'm going to parrot, but my personal belief is that if you're going to charge me a tax, I want you to show me something for it. So I don't know how people feel about taxes, because people, feel differently about taxes. And that's a conversation for another time. But what I would say is, if you can show beyond any reasonable doubt that if this, whatever you're planning had to go to court, beyond any reasonable doubt that any New Yorker on the street can say, you know what, I'm willing to pay that extra dollar.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? It's one of the highest tax jurisdictions in the country, right? New York City, just to be clear, it's got one of the highest municipal governments. It's not like this is a small government place. The question of are the services up to how much people are paying for them?
And I think it is something that I think about often, because as much as I think about public goods, I think about public excellence. Right? We don't want to try and convince a New Yorker in a conversation about the worth of something. We want to be able to prove it to them through what it is that we're delivering. And I think that's where it comes back to, is that the taxes that we're calling for on the wealthiest of the wealthy, the most profitable corporations of those that do business here in New York, they are ones that we would then use that revenue to transform the lives of every New Yorker.
Yeah, so you just heard that. And you see, that's where I fundamentally disagree with Mamdani. This idea that government solves people's problems by taking more from one group and redistributing it through government programs, it sounds good on paper, but in practice, it creates a different issue. Because what ends up happening usually is you build a system that more and more people start to rely on, right? And instead of shrinking over time, those systems only end up growing more. More people end up depending on them. More funding is needed to keep it going. And now the government has to keep finding new ways to bring in more money to sustain it. And so instead of actually solving for the problem, you expanded it. But that's the update and my thoughts. Now let me hear from you. Drop your comments down below. Appreciate when you guys chime in. Don't forget, enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up. That's the best way to let me know. Subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. And as always, until next time.
Bye.